So it goes without saying that Christopher Nolan is considered one of the greatest directors still working today. His works and movies have had incredible cultural impact, and he continues to pave the way for modern day visionaries. He's a master of the craft and has led some of the most complex and ambitious movies in cinema history. But the time has come to pit them all up against each other and see which movie comes out on top. Today we'll be ranking every single one of Christopher Nolan's movies from worst to best. So stick around and be sure to tell us below what your ranking looks like. We'd love to hear it. So without further delay, let's get right into this. First up, we have Nolan's directorial debut, Following. This 1998 feature follows a young writer as he follows strangers for material before going down the path of robbery. It's a paranoia-induced movie that has some good twists and turns and some really good moments. It's hard to rate this one against all his other movies with 100,000 times his budget on this one, but even in his early debut, you can see the makings of a genius filmmaker even on this budget. It's really only up from here, but for the sake of this ranking, we'll be putting Following first at the bottom. Next up, we have the 2002 thriller, Insomnia. The story follows two LA homicide detectives who are dispatched to a northern town where the sun doesn't set to investigate the methodical murder of a local teen. While this one is grounded more in reality and has a great premise, it's the execution and pacing that sets the movie back. Despite having such a match made in heaven with legends like Al Pacino and Robin Williams, there was just something about the pacing of the movie that felt a little off. The slow, mundane nature of the film left a bit to be desired, and I couldn't help but feel like Williams was wasted in a way. Understandably, the movie is supposed to be a slow burn, as this detective works tirelessly to fight both the main killer and Insomnia. It has some pretty good moments with a really good writing, but unfortunately, because of it compared to all the other movies, we'll be putting this one second at the bottom. Next up, we have The Dark Knight Rises, the final movie of the Dark Knight trilogy. The third film finds Batman at the crossroads, as he must fight Bane, a masked terrorist who has taken Gotham as his own. While it's bigger in scale, it doesn't quite hit the same notes as The Dark Knight or Batman Begins. For starters, I think Tom Hardy blew it out of the park as Bane, and really embodied a sinister and intimidating character at scale. Unfortunately, this is my least favorite in the Dark Knight trilogy, and despite it having a great ending, the middle portion of the movie felt a little strange with pacing and execution. Some of the technical aspects of the movie also pale in comparison to the other two, and while it's really entertaining and has brilliant moments like all three of them do, it seems to bite off a little more than it can chew. It's definitely the most ambitious in the scope, introducing Catwoman, Bane, and all other characters in this final act, all equipped with the large-scale, revolutionary-style set pieces. So all in all, it is really an entertaining ride and has really good moments, but it just isn't as good as the others on this list. Next up, we have Tenet, and as bold as it may sound, this is perhaps the most confusing Nolan movie and plays with the viewer's mind in a way that his other movies don't. Tenet delves into this idea of reality moving both forwards and backwards simultaneously. As a positive, I love the unique and interesting scenes that Nolan was able to capture on the back of this idea. On a technical level, the action is mesmerizing to look at, and surely something I've never seen before. As you see a world both move forward and backward, your mind doesn't know what to think, but with the intensity of the soundtrack and cinematography, it's hard not to stay glued to the screen. That being said, I can't help but feel like he lost the logistics and science of it with this mind-bending subject, despite the best of his efforts. It was still difficult to follow. You mix this with an intertwining, fast-moving story, and you get head scratches throughout. It's impressively complex, but almost too much. As much as I rave about the technical impressiveness of the movie, they had some sound issues that caused the dialogue to sound muddy in some parts, something you rarely have ever heard of in an A-list movie like this. But focusing back on the plot and execution, the rapid moving story definitely feels like you're working overtime to understand it. And as the final gripe goes, the ending of the movie is extremely lackluster and surprising for Nolan. It feels so anticlimactic and messy, completely counter to Nolan's epic endings. Now, while it may sound like we're talking more negative than positive, Tenet has a lot of great aspects and really one of his most ambitious movies and unique movies. It is underrated and does take a few watches, but there's something there that really holds it above some of the other ones I just mentioned. So because of that, we're going to be putting it at the number 9 spot. At number 8, we have the first entry of the Dark Knight franchise, Batman Begins. As an excellent introduction to the Batman trilogy, Nolan establishes very quickly to the audience that he'll be bringing a new level of grit and realism to this beloved franchise. The dark world of Gotham City is terrorized by Scarecrow, played by Cillian Murphy. Batman's origin story is a much more visceral and realistic than seen before, and Nolan did a great job of giving the character a new look and vibe. Mixed with the epic soundtrack by Hans Zimmer and a great performance by Christian Bale and Liam Neeson, Batman Begins is a great first movie to set the tone and pace for the masterpiece that comes after it. While Batman Begins lacks in super memorable moments when compared to the others, it's tight and very well paced. Next up, we have Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. Dunkirk takes audiences into World War II as Germany advances into France, trapping Allied troops on the beaches of Dunkirk. The film is cut into 3 major sequences of war: 1 week on land, 1 day at sea, and 1 hour in the air. Once again, on a technical level, it has some of the most impressive and beautifully shot sequences, most notably the dogfighting sequences during the air scenes, as planes weave in and out, narrowly missing as the eerie sounds of planes reverberate across the sky. It's absolutely amazing. But this is just one notable sequence along with many others that leave you glued to the screen. It was awesome seeing Christopher Nolan tackle more of a war type movie, and he does it again in brilliant effect with creating the 3 levels all happening near the same time at different time periods. The cast is wide, but everyone plays their parts immaculately. There's a few moments where the pacing seemed a bit slow, but overall it's definitely one of the most well put together World War II films I've ever seen, and is still one of Christopher Nolan's best attempts as a historical event such as this one. Next up, we have one of Nolan's older films, but one of his most compelling, Memento. This movie in particular is one of the best examples of a health condition showcased on the big screen. The story follows a man with short-term memory that tries to connect the dots on his wife's murderer. The audience is thrown right into our main protagonist's point of view, as the story is told in reverse but in chronological order. It's as trippy as it sounds. And in addition to this crazy format, there are also flashbacks that are put in black and white. It's a brilliantly creative and insanely complex storyline that has the audience guessing, and as you learn more and more about all the characters and all the interweaving plot that's happening, it's absolutely genius to see this level of storytelling brought to the screen. It's a reason why this one continues to be classic and a fan favorite. Honestly, if it wasn't for the other movies being so amazing, this one would be going much higher on the list, honestly. Memento is one of Nolan's, probably one of his smartest movies, apart from all the other ones he's had. So with that being said, Memento goes next. Next up, we have Interstellar. Interstellar follows ex-NASA pilot Cooper. When Earth becomes inhabitable and humanity faces extinction, Cooper must pilot a ship of scientists through a wormhole to find a new planet in another galaxy. Despite being a film about space exploration, it is surprisingly Nolan's most devastating and saddest film. At its core, it's much more than just a sci-fi movie. Nolan was able to put a stark emphasis on heart, character, and the devastation of time when it comes to space and life. This paired with one of the most beautiful original soundtracks ever by none other than Hans Zimmer, and you get a true masterclass of cinema. On a technical level, it delivers on all fronts, and the cast really embody their characters, especially as Cooper's children have both a young and old version of themselves. In typical Nolan fashion, most of the effects within the film were done practically, as crazy as that sounds. The visuals are truly something to behold, with so much detail in the ship, space, and environments. It leaves you in awe. Honestly, Interstellar is a very tragic story, but one that really sticks with your mind way after it's done. So because of that, we'll be putting Interstellar at the number 5 spot. Next up, we have his newest movie, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer delves into the world and mind of physicist Robert Oppenheimer, a scientist and creator of the atomic bomb, whom Nolan himself deems the most important man who ever lived. What stood out to me most about the film was the impressive way in which it was both shot and written. For starters, it's the first film in history to be shot fully in IMAX, with a staggering 11-mile-long IMAX film reel weighing 600 pounds. It really feels like a generation-defining film. I was a bit skeptical as to whether a biopic of this nature would fully make use of IMAX, given that the majority of the movie is dialogue-driven, but Nolan delivered on all fronts, taking creative liberties with framing, sound, and keeping it practical in his typical fashion. The cinematography is spot on, effectively utilizing close-ups to add tension and anxiety. Secondly, it has perhaps one of the most star-studded casts I've seen in recent time. Practically everyone on screen, whether it was a big or small role, were known in some capacity, and most importantly, did an amazing job. But how can we talk about the cast without talking about the man himself, Cillian Murphy? In every sense of the word, he embodies Oppenheimer, from his stances to the look, to the way he spoke and interacted with the world, and with the film that was written and intended to be viewed from Oppenheimer's point of view, it's no wonder it works so well when the lead is hitting that level of perfection. It isn't a Nolan movie without a great soundtrack, as they explore the possibility that they could cause a chain reaction that will destroy the world. It's truly a heart-pounding and exhilarating experience. Lastly, it isn't a Nolan movie without a great soundtrack. Composer Ludwig Göransson, also used for Tenet, created such a unique atmosphere. As for negatives, I felt that the film slowed down a bit too much near the end, and there was a certain sense of tension that I felt was missing in the duel between Oppenheimer and Strauss in the final moments of the movie, but honestly, this is one of his best movies and his most recent one, so I can't wait to see what comes next. Oppenheimer is at number 4. At number 3, we have The Prestige. In 1850s London, after a tragic magic trick goes wrong, two magicians find each other in an intense feud in an attempt to outperform each other. This movie is as much about the characters as it is about the spectacle and illusions. The root of the story lies in the sacrifice and downsides of obsession and utter consumption that our two leads are engulfed by, as these two magicians push their mental and physical limits in an attempt to one-up each other. The script and story are so well crafted and flow with excellent pacing as it weaves through concepts and plot points, ultimately ending with a brilliant twist and, in my opinion, one of his best endings. Honestly, The Prestige continues to be very underrated. It is a masterpiece in its own way. We can sit here analyzing and taking apart the movie to see the genius of it, but honestly, it continues to be an excellent one. So The Prestige goes at number 3. When looking at Nolan's catalog of movies, it was tough to choose the number 1 spot, but narrowly missing that spot, we have the mind-blowing powerhouse Inception. I remember when this movie came out, the buzz and complexity of it was enough to hit the mainstream. When I finally saw it, I was blown away by a vulnerable and emotional story covered in the layers of a complex and visually stunning heist film. Inception follows a thief who steals corporate secrets through the use of dream-sharing technology. He's given the inverse task of planting an idea into the mind of a CEO, but things get complicated when his tragic past creates complications in the process. Like all of Nolan's movies, Inception is an absolutely behemoth of a premise, and literally uses several levels of events all going on at the same time, and synced up with each other to make this insane heist a possibility. And to make things even more complex, the idea of time is used to create brilliant set pieces. As crazy as a premise as it is, this is one of Nolan's tightest movies. The acting is brilliant from the cast, the script is deceivingly deep on an emotional level, and the soundtrack is a triumph by Hans Zimmer. Plus, the ending to this day continues to be a topic of popular culture. For me, this is one of the most memorable movies by Nolan, and I still continue to visit it to this day. Just an amazing movie through and through. Number 2 spot, narrowly missing number 1. And finally, we make it to the number 1 best Nolan film out there today. This might not come as a surprise, but of course we have none other than The Dark Knight, the second addition to the Batman series. Goes without saying that The Dark Knight is regarded as one of the best superhero movies of all time, and one of the best movies ever in general. And for me, it's one of my favorites. This time around, we find Batman against one of the most iconic villains ever, the Joker. During this 2.5-hour runtime, the audience is met with a roller coaster of emotions, from fear to suspense to humor and everything in between. It goes places that a lot of movies in this genre wouldn't dare go, and does it in impeccable fashion. While it has been talked about ad nauseum, Heath Ledger as the Joker is one of the best portrayals of a villain in cinema history, and still holds up to this day 15 years later. Nolan does a brilliant job at tackling the premise of good versus evil, and does not hold back any punches doing so. The Joker wreaks absolute havoc on Gotham, and each set piece creates a jaw-dropping and tense experience. The entire cast brings their A-game, and the gut-wrenching soundtrack makes this one for the record books. The movie checks all the boxes for what makes a movie great and a blockbuster great, and timeless. The Dark Knight is Nolan's best movie, and still continues to be talked about heavily 15 years later. Well, there you have it. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. And before you go, tell us below whether you agree or disagree. We'd love to hear it, and we'd love to hear your rankings. Please consider hitting that subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest rankings, reviews, and all that fun stuff. Until next time, Placid5 signing off.